Hi there, my name is Ron Rogers, and this presentation is titled A Truly Tragic Accident That Led to the Development of TCAS and Many Other Safety Enhancements. This is the crash of PSA Flight 182 that occurred on September 25th, 1978. Now, I remember this well because I was very nearby. I was up over the hill in Edwards Air Force Base, Edwards, California there, at the base of the Mojave Desert as a chase pilot at the Flight Test Center. And this was, of course, all on the local news. At the time, I was going to be an Air Force pilot, and this was an interesting airliner accident, as of course they all are, and I was a pilot, but I'm more of an observer. I wasn't an airline pilot back then. But this accident, like many in this period, led to a lot of safety enhancements, including Class B airspace, which I'll discuss if you're not familiar with that. That was one of the enhancements. Now, this accident killed 135 people on board the aircraft, and it also killed 7 people on the ground. It crashed into a very populated area in San Diego. So 7 people on the ground were killed, including 2 children. 9 others were also injured on the ground, and 22 residences were damaged. It produced quite an impact, and I'll show you. And there's an interesting aspect to the NTSB investigation. If you're familiar with the movie, the 1957 movie with Henry Fonda, 12 Angry Men, about how one individual can change the course of a whole group. And there's an interesting aspect on the NTSB report, and which kind of relates to this movie. This movie actually was also used with our cockpit resource management training. Parts of it were played to show what the effect of one person could have on a group. A very interesting movie if you haven't seen it. Now, this is the PSA 727 involved in the accident. And this is the 172. Now, I've done a lot of instruction in 172s when I worked at the Cessna Flying Club. I was in flight test there at Cessna, and kind of as a side thing, I went over to the Cessna Flying Club and gave instruction. The nice thing about it is we would get brand new aircraft, some of the nicest aircraft you'd ever see. But I never owned a 172. I owned a 172 RG to teach my son how to fly for the complex and the instrument rating. But hey, I digress. One thing I'd like to say, thanks to all you guys who are watching now. I've got enough of you that I actually have a sponsor. So I want to have a quick word from my sponsor here. Hey, let me tell you about my sponsor. I've been getting a lot of spam calls lately, and I have to answer my phone because I got rental properties. But more often than not, it's a solar panel salesman or a car warranty company on the other end. Even worse, I once got a call from someone pretending to be my grandson. When I asked him his name, he hung up. It's scary to think how easy scammers can access our information to use it to target us. And it's not just phone calls. I've had my credit card information stolen several times, with fraudulent purchases showing up in the middle of the night. It's a violation of privacy, and it leaves you feeling vulnerable and exposed. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura is an all-in-one online security solution that helps protect my personal information and keep me safe from scams and fraud. With Aura, I can see what data brokers are selling my information and request to have it removed. Plus, I get alerted if my information shows up on the dark web or if there's suspicious activity on my accounts. Aura also includes a VPN to keep my online activity private, a password manager to create and store strong passwords, and even parental controls to keep your family safe online. And if the worst happens and my identity is stolen, Aura provides $1 million in insurance to help me recover. In today's digital age, protecting our personal information is more important than ever. Aura makes it easy to take control of your online security and privacy with one comprehensive solution. You can go to aura.com/Ron Rogers to start your 2-week free trial, also linked below in the description. Don't wait until it's too late. Take action now to keep yourselves and your loved ones safe online. You won't regret it. Thanks for listening. Okay, here's the situation. This is from the accident report that was published in '79. It's very hard to read. I'll get a little closer blow up here and talk about a couple of the aspects. All right, here's blown up, still hard to read, but the blue arrow is the 727, the PSA 727 that was coming down from Los Angeles. Now, I have flown this route many times in 737s, 727s, Airbus. Coming out of LA or San Francisco down, it's a very picturesque route, very pretty route, and you come in from the north, and you predominantly land on runway 27, which has a localizer only approach. And anybody who knows about San Diego, it's with the parking garage there, it's always an interesting place to fly into and a lot of fun. Now, the ILS, because of the terrain in that, you can't put an ILS on runway 27. It's too steep. I mean, it works great for a C-17, but for most aircraft, it's a little too steep for a precision approach. So if you need to land with an ILS, and I've done that a few times, once in a while the weather's really bad, so you come in on 27. Well, the 172 there had just shot a approach to runway 9 that had the ILS. They were doing practice approaches. It was an instructor and a student. The student was working towards an instrument rating, so they're in the San Diego area shooting instrument approaches, practice instrument approaches in VFR conditions. It was a bright sunny day in VFR conditions, and they're shooting approaches, and the 727 with the blue arrow is coming in from the north. Now, these guys had gone missed approach, and this was back before airspace tightened down. The Cessna was told to fly a heading of 070. And as you can see from the track there as it moves up, that's a 70 heading. Well, for unknown reasons, he turned to a 090 degree heading. Now, as you probably know, if you fly little airplanes, the heading can get away from you pretty fast. And being that he was a student, he and the instructor could have had a discussion. This is all speculation, but for some reason, their attention may have wavered, and he didn't tell the controllers that he was deviating from the heading. And there's a little discussion about whether he actually needed to do that. And since this wasn't what later became Class B airspace, he wasn't required to. The accident report concluded that if he had maintained his 070 degree heading, that they would have passed each other by about 1,000 feet. But unfortunately, they had the heading, and they ended up impacting. The 27 actually ran over the top of the 172, more or less. It was a bit of an off angle. They did a lot of studies on cockpit visibility in that, and like the 727, and they have those standard window displays they show and what you can see from the various seats. It gives you a distorted picture of the window, but part of the problem with see and avoid, and that's the big aspect of the accident here with see and avoid, is that the aircraft that you are going to hit is the one that doesn't move in the windscreen. Now, this is back when I was in the Air Force and we were doing turning rejoins or rejoining on an aircraft. The way that you knew that you were going to rejoin on the aircraft was that you held him stationary in the windscreen as you came up the line into position. So that's how you knew you were going to impact him if you didn't slow down and go into the wingtip position. So the aircraft you're going to hit is the one that's not moving in the windscreen. And of course, that's the most difficult one to see. The other aspect of that is the fact that there was a lot of ground clutter. This is over a residential area, and so there's a lot of houses down there. The airplane had kind of a yellow tint to it, and the houses being southwest had that same coloring to a lot of degrees. So you get the ground clutter. The airplane could be difficult to see. And the other aspect of this is there was supposedly a third aircraft. Now, when air traffic control says to you, they say, hey, there's an aircraft, 2 o'clock low. Do you have him? Well, they want you to see him. They want you to maintain visual separation. But one of the worst things you can do as far as a crew is say, yeah, I have him. Because now, in a non-radar environment where they're not controlling the other aircraft, it's your duty to see and avoid. And if you've got an area where you got a lot of ground clutter, you better make sure you can see that guy. And you better make sure you're seeing the correct guy. Because if you're looking at the wrong aircraft and the guy that's the factor, the collision factor, he's going to run right into you because you're focusing on this other guy. So it's really dangerous. So I'm very disinclined to say I have that I can see an aircraft, because it takes a lot of the responsibility off ATC depending on the situation and throws it on me. And then the other thing is you got to maintain that you do see that aircraft. So unless you know that you can see that aircraft very well, and this works well in the little airplanes, like if I'm in my Cessna, but in a faster airplane, it's much more dangerous because you can easily lose sight of the other aircraft. So now let's talk about one of the safety enhancements that came out of this, and it's called TCAS. That's Terminal Collision Avoidance System. This works if the airliner that typically has these systems on it is able to interrogate another aircraft that has a transponder with Mode C. Now, if you don't have a transponder with a Mode C on the other aircraft, they're essentially invisible. But in these high traffic areas, the aircraft are required to have that before they can enter. So it gives you a lot of benefit. And you've got various positions that you can see depicted here that you have a cautionary, and you'll get a caution warning on the TCAS system. And if it gets into a warning area, it will tell you to take corrective actions, and these are things that you must follow. And this can be depicted in a number of ways. Here's the Airbus depiction. Now, basically what we have here is an aircraft just above us, on our altitude, or could be slightly above us. Anyway, it's a situation where you have the possibility of a collision, and the red area in the vertical velocity window there that you see on the attitude indicator depiction on the Airbus depiction says, okay, you see that little needle? It says get out of there, descend, and it'll tell you to descend. And the green arrow is where you want to put the vertical velocity to make sure that you clear. Now, on the Boeing, you have a similar thing, same depiction. You've got the red bar over there on the vertical velocity indicator, and they also have a box up there that's basically don't fly into this box, fly out of this box. And that is the system that will get you away from another aircraft. Now, I've had a few of these. Mostly it's been light airplanes that were in a place they shouldn't be, and you get a resolution advisory and you follow it. I've also had, now this was a lot of fun. I'm flying a 727 Captain from Chicago O'Hare to Phoenix, Arizona, and there's a stadium off the end of the runway I'm coming into, and there's a little dirigible down there. And of course, to make the thing even more fun is I got an FAA guy giving me a line check. And actually, it was a lot of fun. If you can say that having an FAA guy on your jump seat is fun ever. But it actually was a lot of fun because he had been involved in certification and flight test. And of course, with my ALPA work, I had spent decades in certification and flight test. So we had a very enjoyable discussion on the way in. But I'm coming in to land. Okay, I see the dirigible down there. That's fine. I get an RA, a resolutionary advisory off it. It tells me to climb. Because the balloon. And I told Tower, he says, okay, following the advisory, you go through the typical steps. You disconnect the autopilot, you ignore the flight director because it's telling me to fly the ILS, you follow the TCAS, and you inform ATC. And so I'm going around chewing up a couple 1,000 pounds and making everybody late for their connections or their loved ones. And, I tell Tower, can you get that thing out of the way? I don't want to do another RA for your balloon down there. But anyway, I digress. Oh, T-shirts? I'm working on T-shirts. But, okay, let's talk about this. Now, the PSA 727 impacted, it actually hit a house, 3611 Nile Street, 3 miles northeast of Lindbergh Field. That's what you call the San Diego airport. You're not familiar with that. And it was in a residential area known as North Park. The little red circle there with the marker is the location of the actual crash site. And I'll show you it here a little closer. It impacted in a very steep angle, and I'll show you some of those pictures, at 260 knots, nose down degree attitude, 50 degrees bank to the right. They actually use seismographic data to determine the exact moment that it impacted. And here's a little blown up. Just 30 feet from Dwight and Nile Street is where the 172 impacted, and the Cessna impacted the ground about 3,000 feet from this impact point. Now, one interesting thing about this flight is the tower controllers had received an alert from the radar system that they had that there was a traffic conflict. But because supposedly the PSA crew said they had seen the Cessna, and they were, maneuvering supposedly to avoid it, and the fact that these systems have false warnings, false alerts, they ignored it. Of course, this was not the time to ignore it. And the aircraft impacted in a very populated area. The photos, of course, there were a number of people who, being a very populated area, were able to get these photos. Pulitzer Prize winning photos, actually. There was some camera crews around for various events who were able to take these photos. And this is the neighborhood area with the wreckage. And this is some of the aftermath of cleaning up and going through the still smoldering wreckage site. And there, of course, you'll recognize as one of the engines off the 727. More crash area photographs. Part of the fuselage of the PSA 727. And of course, here is a depiction from the NTSB report of the general service area, the terminal radar service area surrounding Lindbergh Field that didn't have a lot of restrictions. Now, the one reason they were doing ILS approaches at Lindbergh Field was Montgomery Field and Gillespie, the other little airports around there, did not have any radar, any instrument facilities like ILS or localizer to practice any approaches. So if you wanted to work on your instrument rating, you had to go down to the busy Lindbergh Field, and Lindbergh San Diego Airport is the busiest single runway airport in the United States. They quickly changed that and put facilities at other airports. Now, I've flown into Montgomery and Gillespie a number of times in my 310, and of course, this is very congested airspace. It's very easy to fly out here in the Midwest. Well, I'm right outside of O'Hare here. Now, that's a lot of airspace. But as long as I go west or south, or northwest, it's not too much of a problem. It gets wide open in a big hurry, so it's very uncongested. But flying up and down the West Coast is it keeps you on your toes. There's a lot going on. And of course, the airspace has gotten a lot more complicated now with the Class B overlays and things like that, and the altitude restrictions and the requirements. Oh, if you notice up there, David's house, that's where my youngest son lives with his wife, who is a PhD geneticist. Very, very smart lady. And my son is in genetics also, and they both live out there. Now, here is a depiction of the Class B airspace, which was overlaid on San Diego and any other high traffic area. And basically, to go in there, okay, Now, this would have been required to the 172 as opposed to they could just operate out of their VFR. Now, to go in there, you got to have an ATC clearance, you got to have a pilot certificate, or you can have a student certificate, but you have to have an endorsement, you have to have two-way communications, and you have to have within 30 miles of the airport, you have to have a transponder, and it gets all sorts of requirements that you can read in the little list there. These are the little cards that as flight instructors, instrument flight instructors, or civilian flight instructors too, we hand out to our students so they have a reference to the various types of class airspace that they have to adhere to, and the rules and the requirements and the considerations, weather, visibility, things like this. Now, the NTSB concluded in their 1979 report that the probable cause was the failure of the PSA crew to follow proper air traffic control procedures. They had advised air traffic control that they had visual contact with the Cessna 172, but they failed to keep it in sight and keep separation from it, and they listed that as a cause. As a finding, they listed the fact that the Cessna did not maintain its assigned heading, although the report found that if they had maintained their assigned heading, the collision wouldn't occur. They'd had about 1,000 feet separation. But that was only listed as a finding. It wasn't listed as a probable cause. Now, McAdams didn't like that at all. And in the final NTSB report, if you download it and look at the PDF file, you'll see with big magic marker the probable cause is X'd out and amended in 1982 by Mr. McAdams' comments. Now, Francis McAdams, one of the board members, wrote a dissenting opinion, and he provided a lot of detail for his dissenting opinion, but in the conclusions, he states, based on the foregoing, I state the probable cause as follows. Was a failure of the flight crew of Flight 182 to maintain visual separation and to advise the controller when visual contact was lost, and the air traffic control procedures in effect which authorized the controllers to use visual separation procedures in a terminal area environment when the capability was available to provide either lateral or vertical radar separation to either aircraft. Contributing to the accident were failure of air traffic control system to establish procedures for the most effective use of conflict alert system at the San Diego Approach Control Facility, the failure of the controller to restrict PSA 182 to a 4,000-foot altitude until clear of the Montgomery Field Airport traffic area, the improper resolution by the controller of the conflict alert, the procedure whereby two separate air traffic control facilities were controlling traffic in the same airspace, the failure of the controller to advise PSA 182 of the direction of movement of the Cessna, the failure of the Cessna to maintain the assigned heading, and the possible misidentification of the Cessna by PSA 182 due to the presence of a third unknown aircraft in the area. There are approximately 16 witnesses on the ground who report sighting a third aircraft. Of course, like I mentioned before, part of the whole thing with see and avoid is sometimes people will say, yes, I have the aircraft, and what they have in sight is the wrong aircraft. So that's why the see and avoid can be so dangerous, especially in a very heavy environment such as this. Now, there was a plaque dedicated to the accident victims, and it's actually located at the San Diego Aerospace Museum in Balboa Park, and it was put there at the 20th anniversary of the crash site. Now, it's interesting. I've been to the Aerospace Museum in San Diego. Actually, I went with a Gemini astronaut there, and he pointed out some things. That was Gordon Fullerton, and he pointed out some things that the museum had on display that were his that he had given to the museum. So that was kind of a fun little time. I digress. I know. I'm sorry. But I've actually this is out by a tree, I guess, somewhere, and I've never seen it that I'm aware of. So when I go back there to visit my son, the David's house thing, I'm going to have to take a look for it. Of course, one of the tragic aspects about this accident was the fact that we have the cockpit voice recorder, so we know what the crew was talking about in their final moments, and the crew knew they had hit the aircraft once they'd had the impact, and they knew they were going down. And it's if you've ever been in a situation where you have to go in and listen to a CVR and you listen to it as a crew member who knows the crew members you're listening to, you're listening to these guys' voices as they're about to die, and you're identifying, yeah, that's the co-pilot. Yeah, I know him. That's the engineer. And that's one of the very difficult aspects of accident investigation. Another thing that came out about this, and it wasn't cited as contributing to the accident, but this was pre-sterile cockpit, where below 10,000 feet, you only discuss items relevant to conducting the flight. You don't tell jokes, and of course there were a few jokes and comments that were not necessary to the proper conduct of the flight that were made in there. That didn't really contribute to the accident as such. It didn't help it. It probably took their focus away from looking as much as they should. But there's another aspect to this accident in PSA that's rather interesting in a tragic fashion. There was a Don St. Germain, who was an employee of PSA, was aboard this flight, and he died with 143 passengers and crews. 9 years later, his brother-in-law, Douglas Arthur, who was a PSA pilot, was killed aboard PSA Flight 171, along with 42 other people, when a recently fired employee, Burke, shot his former boss, a flight attendant, and the two pilots before he sent the airplane into a nosedive. And so what happened was Nikki St. Germain lost her brother in the first ever deadly crash of a PSA flight, and her husband in the second. These are the only two deadly crashes in the 40 years of the airline. And of course, as a flight crew member, it used to be a lot easier to get through security and that. And most of the time, we did not go through security. We just showed our badges and we went right on through. Well, the guy who got on board this flight, he was a PSA employee, and he just showed his badge and got on with a gun. So, well, guess what happens? Everything gets tightened down. And of course, you'd say, well, they should just do that for employees. Pilots, you can trust. Well, of course, I'll talk about the FedEx, where the pilot got on board and tried to kill the other pilots to fake an accident and collect insurance. So, pilots aren't pure either. So, anyway. That's the story of PSA Flight 182, a flight I remember very well because of my, as an active pilot at the time, and a very tragic flight, but not the last of a mid-air collision that led to the development of TCAS. And there's another one, the Cerritos accident, that I'll also talk about here in just a bit. Anyway, thanks for watching. I appreciate it.